Perfect. We're going to talk about all of this. And I can even just tell you from my own experience that when I took the step and started working on myself in this way, really understanding the subconscious mind, it really gets to a deeper layer that isn't always conscious. And it can really help us with those habits that we want to break that are so tethered to old stories. And what we're going to talk about today in the interview specifically is people's relationship with food, and specifically sugar, because that's sort of where a lot of my patients are having blocks. You know, they come in, they're overweight, they want to lose weight, they have negative digestive implications from what they're eating, and they know it, but they can't stop eating the foods that are causing them harm. Mm-hmm. So Donald's going to help us to understand what's happening around that in the subconscious mind, how we can start to explore why those things are happening, and how we can then thus start to create some real positive change in our lives where we're eating foods that are nourishing our bodies and we're aligned with what we want to be doing. Okay, good. So my first question for Donald is, I want you to tell us a little bit about how you got into this field and why you're so passionate about it. Absolutely. And in that, I'd love you to also let us know, what does a master hypnotherapist do?
Okay, so I was actually in the investment banking world prior to...
I had no clue.
prior to getting into this field. And there was a lot of things that I was not happy in my career path. It was a very high stress, high energy lifestyle. And I started...
How long were you in that?
I was in that for 4 years.
Okay.
And I started to say to myself, there has to be something else. There has to be something more. And I started to do a lot of self-exploration work through psychotherapy and through hypnotherapy. And I quickly became fascinated with the depths at which I was working on myself and what I was finding out about myself. And also noticing the changes that started to take place within my life. And after about 3 months, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to guide people through this process.
Can I ask who your teacher was at that point?
So at that point, my teacher was Georgina Cannon, who is a hypnotherapist. Okay. And I was working...
So you dove in sort of right into this work, that we're going to talk about.
Absolutely.
Right away. Okay.
Absolutely. And so I studied hypnosis, and I through the years studied psychotherapy. I studied NLP as well. Mm-hmm. And I opened my practice, and I took the leap of faith, and my parents thought I was like, they're like, what are you doing? you are leaving this secure job in the investment banking. And I just took the leap, and everything worked out. And I'm so glad that I did, because it's such an honor and a privilege to be allowed to assist people in their lives making change. Mm-hmm. And it is so gratifying to see clients achieve their goals, mm-hmm. right? And it's wonderful. There's no real feeling that is quite like it.
Yeah.
So a hypnotherapist
mm-hmm.
is someone that uses hypnosis as a tool to create therapeutic change for someone. So we work with thoughts, feelings, emotions, and use hypnosis as a vehicle, as a tool to help realign patterning within the subconscious mind.
Okay.
So let's just talk a little bit about the conscious and the subconscious.
Yeah, that's actually a great place to start. And why? Because when I first came to you to do a session around hypnosis, I thought it was the traditional, follow this thing and I'm going to pass out and then I'm going to be in this state and we're going to figure things out. And it actually wasn't that at all.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So can you let us know sort of the reasoning behind hypnosis and why we have to be in a relaxed state, not that typical what you see in the movies, and how that allows us to access that part of the mind?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. And the conscious mind is the logical part of our mind. It allows us to think and to reason And it's responsible for only 10% of what we do every day.
Okay.
So what it does is very, very limited.
And is this the cortex?
It's the frontal cortex.
The frontal cortex.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And it's developed when? Do you know?
Well, the theory is that we actually, the conscious mind doesn't kick in until we're about 6 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
5
really
or 6 years
fascinating
old.
to understand.
And from the time that we're in utero, in development, up until that point, we're actually operating solely from the subconscious mind, which is why the child actually requires the parent to be their frontal cortex for the first 6 years of their life.
Right. And I'm just going to stop you for a second there, because that to me can be very helpful for parents, even as you're saying it to me.
Yeah.
If I know that my child who's 3 doesn't have a logical mind and he's tantruming and he's emotional, I have to understand that. Yeah. Most parents don't. And right away it's like, stop.
Yes.
Right? And they want to stop it. And what they don't understand is that when the child is just emoting and then the parent is trying to be their logical mind, but they're trying to suppress that emotion, how challenging that can be later in life.
Yes. And the parent is actually...
That's fascinating to know that the cortex doesn't develop till 6, and that from 0 to 6, it is just the subconscious / emotional mind.
So it's the subconscious. The emotions are subconscious, right? And so the what we know now is that the default mode network is more what it's referred to today is what stores the subconscious mind. And default mode network.
The default mode network,
which is responsible for approximately 90% of what we do every day. Wow. So all of our emotions, all of our habits, all of our behaviors, everything that is automatic is the responsibility of the subconscious mind. And the reason for this is there's so much that is going on within our body, outside of our conscious awareness, that if they were conscious processes, it would be very difficult to keep up with it. If we had to think about our breathing, right? If we had to think about beating our heart, if we had to think about digesting our food, that would be very difficult to do all with the conscious mind. So the subconscious mind takes care of all of that. Our subconscious mind is in charge of all of our patterns of behavior. So we don't think about most of the things that we do every day, right? It's like we wake up, we brush our teeth, we, make our breakfast, we get our keys, we, go through all of the patterns, even eating, right? All of those things are automatic processes that we have learned through rote how to do, right? And from the time that we're born, in our developmental years, we're actually laying down 50,000 memory networks per second.
And what developmental years are you talking about specifically? Is this 0 to 3 or 0 to 6? 0
to 6.
Until
in that range, until the conscious mind.
So I just want to make sure I'm hearing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
From 0 to 6 is when we're laying down the foundation of what our subconscious mind is going to be for the rest of our lives. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, you're getting your imprints, right? Okay. And the thing is because of the brain has the ability to change itself, but you're getting dealt the hand of cards. If that makes sense.
So your perceptions, how you see things, when you're feeling things, what you think about what you're feeling, all of that is being laid down before you're 6 years old. Yes. And then I don't want to use, power might not be the right word, but it has an effect. It
has an effect
on how we live into our 30s and 40s and 50s from this 0 to 6. So when people talk about the inner child, are they talking about this part of ourselves?
We're talking about different states, right, that we experience. So there may be an inner child that's like 5 years old or 6 years old. There could be a child that's slightly older, 8 years old, right? But in and around that time. Yeah.
So
and usually when we're doing inner child work, right, people go back to very specific ages, and everyone is different. But most of the time when I do inner child work with people, they tend to go back to 0 to 6.
Yeah, 0 to 6, somewhere in and around there where they started to lay this framework.
That's correct.
Okay, so then, and what you're saying is that we're not even conscious that this framework has been laid?
We're not conscious of it at all. especially because we're operating solely from a subconscious place, right?
90%, you said.
90%,
Wow.
right? And so this is where, because those foundations are laid already, this is where people's conscious desire for change is very different from what happens. So there's a disconnect between.
So our desire for change comes from the conscious mind always, correct?
Well, there's a conscious desire for change, right? When people say, I want to go to the gym, or I want to start eating.
I want to stop eating sugar. I want to lose weight. I don't like how I feel anymore. That's coming from the cortex, from the conscious mind.
They're making some conscious decision, right? And then they do really well for maybe a couple days, or
a morning.
Or a morning.
Some people, honestly, they'll wake up and then I'm not going to eat sugar, and then it's noon and they're stressed, and in comes the sugar.
Exactly. And then very slowly, and people notice this, it's almost like there's two different parts of themselves. They'll go, okay, that's it. Like, I'm not going to have ice cream. And they'll be telling themselves that, but yet they'll notice that they're walking to the refrigerator and they're opening the door to the fridge. And the whole time there's this inner battle.
Yes.
Right? Between what they want for themselves and what the automatic patterning is.
Yes. And I hear a lot of my patients say to me that they feel like they've lost control when that happens.
Well, it's
or they don't have willpower, right? But that's bullshit, correct?
Well, it's that the patterning is working against them. Right. That's all it is.
Right. So I just want to, I think that's really important for people to understand, because so many people suffer thinking, I'm weak.
Yes.
That's why I'm overweight and I still eat sugar, or I don't have enough willpower. But what they don't understand is actually it's the subconscious mind that, what's the word, like creates the behavior that's working against the conscious mind that wants the change.
It's the
and
old
that's a
pattern.
Human thing, correct?
It's the old pattern.
Okay.
Right. And the good news is that it can be changed.
Yes.
And something that, just to bring in NLP for a second, NLP is a model of excellence and looking how the mind thinks, right? And when we look at it, we have willpower and usually in one area of our life, right? Sometimes people have really good willpower when it comes to studying and achieving something in life. Yeah. Or for some people, it's like they have really good willpower when it comes to exercise. Willpower is willpower, right? So it's like, how can you tap into that ability and move it over to where you need it?
Right.
That's what NLP looks at. Right.
Different than hypnosis.
It's based around a lot of the same principles, right? But it's really creating new neural connections within the brain to connect information into.
It's so fascinating.
It's fascinating,
right? And I think, for me, what I try to illuminate with my patients when they're in the office struggling and beating themselves up, what's wrong with me? I have no control over myself. I have no willpower. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me is I try to teach them, and I'm sure you do too, is that there's nothing wrong with you. No. There's something wrong with the connections in the brain, and so much of this is coming from your subconscious mind that you're not even aware of.
Right.
Correct.
And a lot of the time when it comes to food too,
don't you find people beat themselves up about things
Yes.
that are so human?
Yes.
And
absolutely.
when they can leave that on the side and just say, let's explore this.
Yeah. And when you're able to work through the guilt or the shame, right? And just normalize it and recognize that it's a normal human issue.
Like we all have this battle.
Absolutely we do. And it's all about understanding, okay, why is that battle taking place? Let's explore that, right? And also really looking at what was the experience that someone had that they were younger that was setting them up for this experience when they were older. Yes. So a lot of the time when it comes to food is such a social thing. And so there's a lot of emotion that can be connected to food, right? If you grew up in a household where when you would scrape your knee and your mom would say, here, have a cookie, you'll feel better, right? Then that becomes the patterning. Then every time that someone needs to comfort themselves, they'll start finding themselves turning to food.
Right.
Or
Automatically in adult life.
Automatically.
Yeah.
Right? Or if there was a huge, if food meant community and family, because everybody would eat around the table, right? And there's this sense of connection that is attached to food then, right? So that will follow people through life.
Yeah.
So it's very important too to look into the patterning of what food means to someone at an emotional level as well.
And then it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And, what's interesting about food specifically, and especially sugar, is that sugar has the same chemical effect on the brain as drugs.
Yes, it does.
Right?
Yeah.
So there is also a biological component that, and I see it with my children from such a young age, like sugar calms them down, and I see parents even, they're upset, they do that lollipop or that cookie. And if you learn, especially from 0 to 6, I'm stressed or I'm hyper, and sugar calms me down, that then gets programmed. Sugar will calm you down.
Yes.
So when you're stressed and you're 40, and even though you're overweight, if you're overwhelmed, all you're hearing is, go get sugar, it will calm you down. Is this sort of how it
absolutely
works? So even though our conscious mind in the morning, when we're calm, is saying, don't eat sugar, when the stress comes or the discomfort comes, because it's so programmed, we just automatically go to
that food,
that thing that's going to calm us
absolutely
down.
And what it is too is it's finding new coping strategies, right? It's like food always has a benefit. That's like sugar has a benefit at one level or another. Every behavior that we engage in actually has some sort of a benefit, otherwise we wouldn't do it. Right. And so
benefit, a perceived benefit?
It's a subconscious benefit, right?
Which is different than a conscious benefit, correct?
Right. So, when you look at food, for example, right? It's like it may feel, when people eat sugar, it feels good for a moment, but then it really doesn't feel good, right? Because people have the crash. But somewhere within the subconscious mind, there's that benefit that it perceives that it's getting from it. Right?
So that a minute of comfort.
A minute of comfort, or that minute of like the dopamine hit from the sugar, right? But then
the taste even.
Exactly, or the pleasure. But once that pleasure is gone, then usually people don't feel good, or they crash, or they feel.
Then the guilt comes, the shame comes, and is that when they do feel the guilt and shame of what they've done? Has the conscious mind then turned back on?
Well, guilt and shame are emotions, so those are
still in
that
subconscious,
right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
interesting.
But that's where it's so important to come up with other ways of getting a benefit, right? So it's like, if you're looking for comfort in that moment, what else could you do to comfort yourself? Could you meditate? Could you have a warm bath? Could you have a cup of tea? Could you go for a walk? Could you practice
eat some nuts?
Exactly.
Right? Something healthier.
Some fruit, right?
Yeah.
Anything that's going to give you that comfort in that moment, right? And it's so important to program it in over time too, right? To recognize that change takes time, right? And to be gentle with yourself during that process, right? And to just take it one step at a time, right? Yeah. And the other thing too with cravings, if there is a craving for sugar, is to recognize that it's almost like a wave in the ocean. The wave comes in, but then the wave is going to go back out again. It's not going to stay there forever.
Or make you drown.
Exactly.
But our subconscious minds often can't even handle like the first second of, if it's programmed to be that way.
Exactly. And it's about instant gratification. It's like the subconscious mind knows, it's like, I could feel this way right now. So, I want it now. Right. As opposed to delayed gratification, where it's like, okay, well, if I have an apple, that's a long-term benefit that you're going to get from that.
And that's actually what I want.
Exactly, is the long-term. So it's better to focus more on the long-term gratification with things, as opposed to the instant gratification with sugar.
So how, That's so much easier said than done,
Yeah.
right? Obviously, with all of this in mind. What do you think for people who are stuck in that sugar cycle, okay? And, it's really not serving them,
Yes.
whether it be weight, whether it be digestive issues, inflammation, and they know it's not serving them. Like, that's the thing too. I see a lot of people, they'll go through my cleanse, they'll feel amazing at the end. They won't have eaten sugar or coffee or alcohol or processed foods, full clean eating for 10 days, feel better than they've ever felt. And then in a month, it's all gone.
Yeah.
Can you address that?
Yeah.
Why that happens?
Yeah. So, it's important to frame it as well as that this is not a short-term solution, right?
Yeah.
Like it is long-term change and a lifestyle change.
Yeah.
And it's about understanding too that, it takes around, what we know now is it takes 21 days for us to create new connections within the brain.
I've heard that for 21 days to break or create a habit.
But that's only to create it or break it.
Okay.
What we know now is that it takes around 62 to 66 days in order to fully have that new behavior and that new pattern fully integrated
in the subconscious mind,
into the subconscious mind and into the system. So a lot
62 days. How do they know this?
So there's been research that's been done. A lot of neuroscience research now has given us more of a window into actually what's happening within the neural connections. So when we're creating change, there's actually what they call the neural net, which is all our neural connections. And as the neural net starts to open up and change, and that solidifies after 62 to 66 days. Wow. So a lot of people do really well, in the first 3 weeks or first month, and people usually do that a lot. They'll go to the gym for 3 weeks, or or make any kind of change for a short period of time, and then they'll find themselves starting to slowly go back. So if something is starting to slip back into old patterning, then there's usually something there that needs to be worked on. So it can be really good to notice what the specific areas are that you're having a challenge with. So if it's around, you're at a party and you see a sweet, and you find yourself telling yourself, well, I've done really well for the past little while, so I can have just one. But
that's
then,
a lot. People say that.
But then, and that's the gateway, right? Because
it's no big deal. You've been so good. Start tomorrow. You've already had one. You might as well just give it up. That whole all or nothing mentality.
Yeah. And then as soon as people have a bite, it's like, then they start to, there's actually something that's called the what the hell effect. And it's like, what the hell? I've already had the cake, so I'm going to have the donut and the ice cream,
and we all as humans have this what the hell effect, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And
it's so fascinating.
And then we will say, well, I'll start tomorrow. And then people find that very slowly or very quickly sometimes as well, that the habits will go back. So it's very important to recognize that is something that can happen, right? And if there is a moment like that, I like to equate it to driving a car down the highway. If you scratch the side of your car, you wouldn't say, oh, well, and scratch the other side and drive the car into the ditch, right? You'd make sure that you would drive more carefully. You'd make sure that you're extra careful, right? So it's just to be aware of the fact that, there are those danger zones that can happen, and that the longer that you can stay with the habits, the better it's going to be, and the more that they're going to stick. So if there is stuff if you find yourself sliding back, there may be some patterning that's there that needs to be worked on.
And it would be similar patterning like food is comfort. I keep touching the back of my head when you talk about the subconscious mind, because that's where it is. Whenever I find that just happens, I'm like, So you're saying there just needs to be more work done on that patterning, on that subconscious automatic, food is comfort, food is my savior, I can't survive without food, whatever the messaging is, or sugar, I meant.
Yeah.
So none of us can survive without food. Yeah. But
and if you've done a cleanse as well, then you've reset the body, so at that point, because the body should be pretty good at that
Clear,
point.
yeah.
That whatever's going on is something that is mental or emotional, right? So it's something in the subconscious mind or in the emotions, and so it can be very beneficial to work on that, right, and explore it. And there are ways that people can do that on their own that we're going
Yeah.
to talk about.
So that's sort of the last question I want to ask is, if there are people here who are resonating, and I'm sure there's lots, who wake up in the morning and maybe do well all day, and then at night they're eating. That's another thing I find very typical.
Yeah.
I'll hear from people, I can eat well all day, salads and apples and fruit, and then 9 o'clock, day's done, and I am binging sugar.
Yeah.
So how can people start to even just understand their subconscious mind, their conscious mind, that separation? How can they sort of take the first step?
Yes.
Maybe if they're not going to enter a therapist's room,
Yeah,
how can they take the first step in sort of understanding themselves in this way?
absolutely.
Because it's a game changer. It changed
Yeah.
my life to understand myself in this way, to understand, that there's a whole part of my brain that I have control over when I'm very aware and in tune,
Yes.
but when I'm not, I don't really.
Yeah.
And it's a game changer.
Yeah. So great first place to start. I actually do have a YouTube channel and a podcast.
It's amazing, by the way.
And there's a lot of free resources
Mhm.
on the channel. There are some.
What is the channel?
So it's Hypnosis Toronto, all one word. If you put it into YouTube, it will come up. And there are many programs that are actually related to developing healthy habits and behaviors with food and
Perfect.
reducing sugar. There's also more self-development style
Yeah.
hypnosis programs on there. But the way that I do the programs is always giving some education at the beginning, and then giving people a little bit of a taste of what hypnosis is like with different exercises. So I have over 100 videos on my YouTube channel.
Amazing.
And the podcast is called the Hypnosis and NLP Podcast, and it's available on iTunes and Google Play.
Amazing.
And there's many of the similar resources. There's some different programs, and there are some ones for weight and healthy
Thank you,
eating and reducing sugar. So that's a really great place to start.
Yeah.
And if someone is interested in taking it further, then I would recommend finding someone in their local area that is trained. And I always recommend going in for a consultation, making sure that that person would be a good fit for you to work with, and exploring the subconscious mind at a deeper level in a one-on-one session.
Brilliant. And maybe we can share too some resources of people. I know Donald's practice is full, but some other resources for people if they do want to get started.
Absolutely.
In that way, we'll share that for
Yeah.
sure. So to wrap this up, I want to ask you one question, Donald. And I want to know, with all of your experience, your own journey, working closely with people for almost 18 years now, why are we here? What is the purpose? What's the purpose of life? I ask everyone that. I want to know all my people that I bring on, I respect so much, and I want to know what they believe about that.
I love that question. And I can only speak to what my purpose in life is, but I believe that my purpose of life has been about learning lessons and growing, and through that being the best possible expression of who I am, right? And through that, how I show up in the world and how I show up in the relationships around me. For me, the meaning of life has become all about connection, right? The connection and the relationship to other people, and how that can constantly be improved, right? And through those connections and through those relationships, I found it really gives a sense of meaning and purpose in being here, right? Just having this experience. and making a difference in the world and in people's lives, and having these loving, nurturing connections with others, and continually learning lessons and evolving and growing. That to me is what the meaning of life is, and why we're here. So it's an interesting journey.
So I love that, and I have one question. I know I said that was the last one, but I want to ask you how you feel your work with the subconscious mind applies to that.
Yeah.
Right. So how can people, if they start working in this way, can they start to have more connection or meaning?
Absolutely.
Because I think it's part and parcel, right?
Totally. And I think too that, the connection that we have to others in our lives is merely a reflection of the connection that we have with ourselves. And
I just got to repeat that. The connection that we have with other people in our lives is merely a mirror of the connection that we have with ourselves.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I truly
And then
believe
thus, if
Yeah.
the meaning and purpose is connection, then
Yeah.
that means we gotta
we
spend
gotta
time
connect
here.
We do.
Yeah.
And so, hypnosis really provides us the opportunity of truly going inwards and understanding who we are and how we, what's the word I'm looking for? How we function, how we work. And once we understand the inner workings of ourselves and we work through our own stuff, we start to show up differently, right? And when we start to deeply love and appreciate ourselves and every part of us, right?
It's hard.
It's a journey, right? But when we finally do that, then we can simply just be love and radiate that outward, right? So the more that we're connected with ourselves, the more we can be connected with others.
I love that. Yeah. That's so brilliant and so true.
Mm-hmm.
And, I want to just summarize this by saying that, if we want to change the things that aren't working in our lives, it takes a lot of loving examination.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how we started. It's easy to say, okay, let's look at these subconscious thoughts. A lot of the subconscious thoughts we're not going to like per se.
Yeah.
We're not going to like why they're there. They're not pretty.
Yeah.
A lot of them. Yeah. And we need to know that, but know how human they are.
That's right.
And the more we can explore that, and like Donald said, when we can accept every aspect of who we are, the things that work and the things that don't work, but just explore them, we show up at love.
Yeah.
As love. Yeah. We then have those meaningful connections that then give us purpose in our life.
Exactly. And
awesome.
And yes, the work that we do, the inner work, can be uncomfortable, but when we're comfortable, we're not growing. Right?
Yes.
So
I've been hearing that everywhere lately. No one likes to hear it.
It's so true though, right? And so
when we're comfortable, we're not growing.
So I've really learned to embrace that uncomfortability, right? And sort of lean into it, because when we lean into it and we move through it, that's
magic.
What we want is on the other side of our comfort zone.
Awesome. Love that too.
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
So I will share all of Donald's resources in the notes, and you can find his meditations and explore more. Donald also comes in as a guest expert in some of my alumni groups sometimes, so you might have an opportunity to meet him there. And thanks so much for watching. Thanks, Donald.
Thanks for having me.